Well, today at the Joy Hour Show, I'm excited to introduce my friend, also my coach, Jordan Mendoza. Welcome to the studio.
Hey, appreciate you. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here in the great state of Texas.
Yes.
I don't know if you knew, but I lived in Texas for about a year, a while back in Houston, but I did get the chance to visit Dallas. It was a little bit different back then.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. And you're in, where do you live now?
We're in Metro Atlanta, a town called Lawrenceville, and it's me, my beautiful wife, Natalie, and our 6 children.
All right. From
8 months to 20 years old, believe it or not.
Quite the spread. And I have met your wife actually a year ago in person. When
she was pregnant with our 6th, Wyatt, at the time, who's now, crazy to say, he's 8 months old already.
Yeah, she was getting close.
Yeah.
And so good. Shout out to your awesome family, your wonderful wife. And this is exciting. It's kind of surreal to say we're actually in here doing this, capturing your story. I've heard your story myself a few times, and I'm so excited for it to get captured here. And I know a lot of it also is coming out in your book very soon.
Yes.
If you'd like to go ahead and
I'd love to share a little bit about that. So the book is called The Life-Changing Power of Adversity: How to Overcome Struggles, Unlock Your Potential, and Blaze Your Own Trail to Success. And the reason why I'm so excited about it is adversity is the one thing that everyone's going to experience. You know, we don't know when, we don't know how, but it's really shaped and molded who I am today. I believe that adversity not only gives us strength, but it enables us to see through a lens that most people won't ever see through.
I think that's such a common topic for us, that we go through adversity, and for a lot of my years I went through it in isolation. And so I am excited to hear your story today and how you've stayed connected to just talk about the tools that have helped you as you've pivoted and as you've been through adversity and the growth that's happened in your life. I've been inspired, and again, I've just got to know you a little bit, but now you're coaching me. I'm thankful for that.
Yeah.
And what's happened, so much has happened in a short amount of time in your life. And so before I ramble anymore, I'm just going to turn it over and say, start wherever you want.
Sure.
And share who is Jordan Mendoza.
Well, I can't share about me until I talk about the people that have helped shape and mold me. Outside of my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, there's been some very influential people in my world. The first person I'd love to talk about is my mom. My mom was actually born in General Hospital in Los Angeles. They made a TV show, a soap opera about General Hospital. But when my mom was born in the 50s, they essentially told my grandmother, they said, she was born with one lung, a hypoplastic lung. So they said she's not going to live to 18, and she's definitely not going to be able to have any kids. And this was literally the hand of cards that she was dealt. But what you'll learn about my mom is that she was a fighter. She ended up living to 54 years old, and she ended up having 5 boys. And she's the person that encouraged us and told us, hey, you can do whatever you want, you can accomplish whatever you want, you can be whatever you want. And for some reason, I believed her. And so we didn't have a lot of money. We grew up, super poor, government housing, food stamps, secondhand clothes, kind of like you were explaining with your childhood. And ever since I was really young, because we didn't have a lot, I had to be really resourceful. So I can even remember at 5 years old, I would go door to door. And in Oregon, the state of Oregon, you would get 5 cents for every can. And so I would literally go knock on doors, and some people would say, get out of here, kid. And some people would give me a can. Some people would give me a bag of cans. And I would take that to this little market in North Portland called the Bee Market. And that's how I would get my candy.
Wow.
So even at 5 years old, I was very resourceful. And, I was talking to my wife about this recently. She's like, you're kind of like on your own a lot. And I was like, yeah, I was. And I didn't have a great role model. I didn't have a good father figure in the house. I had a stepdad who was an alcoholic. He was abusive verbally, physically to my mom. I remember one time he threw a beer can across the room and split my mom's head open. And he was in and out of jail. He would get a car, wreck it. My great-grandmother would buy my mom a new car, and he would wreck it. And just not really, didn't really have a role model in the house. And I didn't start getting good role models until my mom started putting us on the church van. And one of our neighbors down the street, her dad was the pastor of an Assemblies of God church, and that's really where I started to feel, the love of God. That's where I started to learn about the Bible. We did these trivias, and we would essentially, if you could learn the Old Testament, you get $5, and if you could learn the New Testament, you get another $5. And so you better believe I was studying and trying to get this money. We didn't have any money,
right?
And so I started to learn about God and about these foundations, and I got into the Christian Boy Scouts, which was called Royal Rangers at the time, and this is kind of where I started to learn that there was a different father figure out there that I didn't have in my life. And in fact, the other role model in my life, you probably won't think he was a great role model when I first start talking about him, because it was my dad. And my dad was a Filipino immigrant. He started working and plowing the rice fields at 7 years old. He went into the military in the Philippines. He became a seaman. And then in the 80s, he jumped ship to come to America and get a slice of the American dream. Well, him and my mom were together. They never got married, and they split up when I was around 2. And I didn't even meet the guy till I was 12 years old. And I remember the day that my mom said, "Hey, you want to meet your dad?" And I said, "Sure, when are we going?" And she goes, "No, Jordan, you're going." And I said, "Okay, I want to go meet him." And so I remember like it was yesterday. He booked the ticket. I flew from Portland, Oregon to Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minneapolis, St. Paul to Washington National. And I get off the plane, and there's a bunch of Asian people, And this was my heritage. This is my stepmom. Wow. My dad remarried. They had, a couple kids together. I got to meet my grandparents, and I started to really uncover the story of like, why did he come to America? And what I realized is that, he was just like a lot of immigrants today, where he wanted a slice of that American dream. He had his family, his relatives that he wanted to take care of. And what I quickly learned about my dad is that he was a hard worker. He was very meticulous. He had built at that point a business for about 15 to 20 years with nothing but a black and white business card. And so he taught me a lot about hard work, about making sure that you do things right the first time. In fact, I remember being a teenager, and I thought I could get away with stuff in doing landscaping for him, and I would leave a couple sticks on the ground. I'm like, "Yeah, it's okay, my dad won't find it." And you better believe, not only did he find it, but he would literally drive us back, make us pick up those sticks, and he wouldn't pay us for that time. And he showed me some very valuable lessons, like, hey, do what you say you're going to do, and do it well. And that's why I'm proud to say that after 40 years, he retired a year and a half ago and moved back to the Philippines. And during that 40 years, he was able to build a rice mill that's now a business, the Mendoza Rice Mill. He was able to build a boarding house that houses 80 college students. And he was also able to build his dream home that now, this summer, our whole family's going to go and get to literally see the goals and dreams and visions that he had. And so, yes, there were a lot of years of resentment towards my dad, because it's like, hey, bro, like, where were you this whole time? Like, why did you just show up and start sending me gifts when I was 8, 9 years old? Why, like, again, so there was probably some abandonment, there was some resentment there, but now we've known each other the last 25 years, and we've got a great relationship. He was just in town. I flew him and surprised the kids for spring break, and man, he is the best grandpa on the planet. And it's just so cool, and I just like to share with people that redemption's possible. Healing's possible. A lot of times we have to get out of our own way and put things into perspective on, maybe his life was hard. Maybe it wasn't that he didn't want me. Maybe he just didn't know how to be a father. And I've gotten a lot of those revelations through my Heavenly Father and the love that he's been able to show me. And, I mentioned my mom lived to 54. Well, in 2011, I got a call from my mom. I was, a property manager at a company called Gables Residential in Atlanta. And she called me, and I was a mama's boy, so I would talk to my mom 2-3 times a day. That's how close we were. And she calls me and she says, "Hey, Jordan, I was going to my doctor's appointment, and I fell in the parking lot." She's like, "I'm going to be okay. They're just going to run some checks." And that was the last time I heard her voice. And what happened was, when you're born with one lung, what starts to happen over the years is it creates a lot of havoc in your body. And so her kidneys, she was in the hospital, she fell, she got pneumonia. That pneumonia made her kidneys weak, it made her heart weak, and her lung, she only had one. And so there was so much fluid, Tom, that they could not get it out fast enough. And it went from November of 11, and she passed away in March. And man, you want to talk about a major loss. You know, I went through this time of not realizing I got in the car to go to work, to not remembering going through the day, to not remembering driving home, and it was like 6 months of a cloud. And I thought it was only 6 months of a cloud, but I didn't realize recently that I've been carrying that weight of her death for decades. And man, it's something that, you know, there was a realization, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, a pivotal moment that happened between me and my wife that made me realize that I put her on a pedestal when I shouldn't have. And instead of my wife being the most important person in my life, I had my mom as that most important person. The other thing too is, you know, because my mom went through so much. I mean, when I was a kid, like, almost died multiple times. You know, when I was 12, she had to start using oxygen every day, and I was the guy that would help. When the delivery driver would come, I learned how to set up the tanks. I learned how much pressure they needed to go in. I made sure her machines were working. And so I carried a lot of weight and a lot of burden for that. I didn't realize till recently that I carried that with me, and caring for somebody. And what that built up in me was this thing called empathy and this thing called compassion. And when you start to hear some of the crazy things that have happened to me, that honestly, until she passed away, I didn't even think I experienced adversity in my life. Like, that's how high of a pedestal I had her on. But what I started realizing when I started reflecting was, man, I went through some stuff, Tom. Like, you know, in 4th grade, I still don't know why to this day we had a graduation picnic for 4th grade. Like, we were going to 5th grade. It wasn't like we were going to middle school, but we were at this park in Oregon called Pier Park. And this is back when tetherball was legal. I think I'm dating myself now for the audience, but there was tetherball, there was baseball, there was water balloon fight. I mean, it was just this fun day. And this park has these massive Douglas fir trees, these sequoias, all these big trees. And I decided to play baseball, I played 12 years, terrible at it. I was very good at spinning around and watching the butterflies, but terrible at playing baseball. And so I'm up to bat, and I take this bat and I swing and I miss and spin around like you do when you're terrible. And the bat flew under one of these big Douglas fir trees. And when I went to grab the bat, I stood up, and there was a like one of those cartoon-esque beehives on my head. And so bees are stinging me. I start running away. The bees are chasing me. Kids are running away from me. Teachers are running away from me. And then finally, some good teachers grab these big coolers, dump this cooler on top of my head, and they start picking the bees off. And there was so much adrenaline, and I didn't cry during that time because, I mean, there was just, the adrenaline was going crazy. And I went to the doctor, and I was stung that day 53 times. And that's how I learned I wasn't allergic to bees, which, thank God, we wouldn't be here today if I was. Right. You know, and that's just one story. And, you know, we moved a lot as a kid, as you can imagine. When you're poor, like, I don't know if we got evicted because of my stepdad. I don't know the circumstance, the context behind it. But one summer, we actually moved 2 towns away, and we were actually moving to get away from my stepdad. My mom had it. She said, you know what? I'm done with this. I'm done with the abuse. I'm done. We just can't be part of your life. So one day he was at work, some of our friends helped us move, and we moved to another kind of ghetto area a couple towns away. And so what that meant was, for me, because I said, Mom, like, this is where we grew up. All my friends are here. And so I begged her, like, can you not take me out of this school? And so what that meant was I had to take 2 public buses. Portland has amazing transportation. There's a system called the TriMet, and they have the MAX. So I had to take 2 TriMet buses. And my mom did the route with me. It was the same route every day. I would take one bus in front of the apartments. That would bring us over to a 7-Eleven. I would wait there for about 20 minutes till my next bus came, and then I would take that bus, and it would go right by my middle school. And so one day I'm sitting in this 7-Eleven, and I would always have a quarter or 2, and I would put them into Mortal Kombat 2. That was my game. And I would sit there and I'd be playing this until the next bus came. And so one day I was doing the same thing I did every day, and I was playing Mortal Kombat 2, and the bell like chimed like someone walked in the store, and I hear a man's voice yell, "Hey, Daniel." And I'm Jordan, so I didn't think anything of it. I'm still playing the game. And literally within about a minute, my body's lifted up in the air. I was slammed against the Terminator 2 pinball machine that had the gun as a trigger, punched multiple times in my ribs, thrown on the ground, handcuffed, and shoved into a police car. And as I'm cuffed and walking out, they're like, we know you're a Hispanic runaway. We know you assaulted somebody. And mind you, at this time, I'm like 5 foot nothing. I'm like 90, probably less, 75 pounds. And my only saving grace as I was handcuffed with my London fog jacket on is I said, sir, I literally went to confession mode. I was like, sir, I don't normally do my homework as I'm crying. And I said, but if you reach in my pocket, you'll see my name is Jordan Mendoza. And so the guy uncuffs me. He opens up that back door. He reaches in that London fog jacket. He pulls out this crumpled up, that's how I rolled, crumpled up sheet of paper. And it said Jordan Mendoza. And when I tell you, brother, like it looked like he saw a ghost because he knew he screwed up. And then so they call my mom. They say there was a big misunderstanding. We thought he was somebody else. And so I go see the school psychologist. They start taking me to different doctors. I got evaluated. I had bruised ribs. I had bruised wrists from the handcuffs. And my mom saw a payday. She's like, we're going to get paid. Like we didn't have money. And I remember looking my mom in the eyes and I said, Mom, all I want in this situation, and I'd seen her struggle. I saw my great-grandmother get cancer and dementia. I saw people struggle. I did not want the same thing to happen to these officers, but here's what I did know. They should not have a job in law enforcement. Like they really screwed up. You don't get that physical. You don't get that violent. And so I said, Mom, I just want them to lose their jobs. That's it. And so I had to see psychologists. I remember they're showing me all these pictures. They're like, do you see a cop? I'm like, no, I see a weird bird looking thing. Like it didn't affect me. The trauma had not affected me. And I know it's because of God. I know it's because I had a heart of compassion and empathy. And so we went through all the pretrial stuff and it ended up happening like I wanted it to. And they lost their job and I ended up just moving on with my life. And that's 12 years old. 12 years old. And I'm sure we'll go into, I've got a few other stories I'd love to share, just because you just see God's intervention in a lot of this stuff. You see how good he is and how he protects us and how he shapes us and how he molds us into the people that we're supposed to be. If we fast forward a little bit, I knew in school, I got my first sales job at 14. Right. And, I was selling at 5. I was getting cans at 5 years old. So, of course, door to door was the job for me. And I remember this guy used to come around in the neighborhood and he's like, hey, we're looking for kids to go with a clipboard and get people to sign up for the newspaper. Again, I'm dating myself here, folks. And so my first sales job was for the Oregonian newspaper. And we'd get a clipboard and we'd have the list of the subscribers on the street and we walk around the neighborhood, we walk around apartments, and we would try to get people to sign up for the daily paper, the daily and Sunday, or the weekly, right? And so, I got good at this, but I remember my very first day, I was terrible. Like I must have knocked on 100 doors. But my smile lasted till about door 10, and then it turned into a frown. And then by door 50, my shoulders were slumped. And then by door 100, my attitude was just so gone. And I remember sitting on the curb with my head between my legs with a full clipboard, empty in sales, and my brother David and my buddy Steve were high-fiving, like they were so pumped because they got sales. And I learned something that day that I will never forget. The guy, his name was Jim Frank. He was the distributor, and we went to his office to settle up. And I remember, I had the clipboard, and I struggled to hand it to him because I knew there was nothing to settle up. And he goes, Jordan, I'm going to tell you something, and I don't know if this will resonate with you today, but I hope one day it'll make sense. And he said, the sale doesn't start until the customer says no. And I said, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Please take me home, And it wasn't until 18 years old when I finished school, I moved to Seattle, got a sales job. From there, I went to the Bay Area, and I remember I got a promotion to be a sales trainer. And I had one guy on my team go out. He came back with the same facial expression I had at 14, with the same body language, and he didn't sell anything. And guess what I said to him? I looked him right in the face, and I said, the sale doesn't start until the customer says no. And what does that mean? Well, that means that you got to get creative. You got to think on your feet. Most people we're ingrained from a young age to say no. No, don't touch the stove. No, don't do this. No, don't do drugs. Say no to drugs. And so most of us, even in today, if you go into a department store, someone asks you for help, what do you do? No, I'm good, right? And so I had to learn how to think on my feet. I had to learn how to use my environment. So I would see a flag for like the Portland Trailblazers, and the first thing out of my mouth wasn't about what I was selling. It was, oh, I love that flag. Are you a Blazer fan? Or I love your, man, how cool is your car? Tell me a little bit more about it. And I did this thing called breaking the ice, because everybody has a wall. And this just isn't for sales, folks. We all have these walls, and we got to figure out how do we break down those layers. And so I learned some valuable lessons in sales, and that really brought me into, at 19, we had this unique opportunity where I was now going to be a part of the team to open a new office, and from California over in New Jersey, Cherry Hill, New Jersey. And so there was a caravan of cars. We had about 6 cars. We took the scenic route to go visit other offices. So we went from California to Nevada to Utah to Phoenix, and then eventually we got into the state of Wyoming. And I'm not sure if any of the listeners or viewers have been to Wyoming, but there's nothing to look at. I mean, you're on this stretch, this freeway called I-80, and it literally every 45 miles there's a gas station. And so it was very, very late at night. I was in the back seat of a Chevy King Cab pickup truck. My buddy was driving. There's 2 other people in the front. And I had fallen asleep at this point, and I woke up to the truck sliding sideways. And then I had enough time to say, holy crap, 3 times as the truck flipped, multiple times going 70 miles an hour. And what happened was our buddy driving, he fell asleep at the wheel. And when he woke up, he actually overcorrected, and instead of hitting the brake, he hit the gas, and we were sliding at 70. And so this truck lands, there's smoke everywhere. We look at the windshield, and our buddy's gone. He had got ejected from the truck. And so we get out. I didn't even realize I was hurt at the time. We're looking around for our friend. We walk over, we found him. He stood up like a zombie, and then he fell back down. And we were like, this is not good. And our saving grace is there were some off-duty EMTs that just happened to be coming from a conference in Colorado, saw the wreckage, called in a helicopter to life flight my buddy to Casper, Wyoming. And it was in that moment where I started to smell something very strong, like iron. And I reached in on my right leg, I put my hand down, and it went in a fist deep on my right leg. I had a big, massive cut, and I was losing pints of blood. And so they took this big heat blanket, threw it on me. Ambulance finally showed up. They rushed me to Rollins. And on the way there, this guy was driving like 85. I remember saying, hey, if the accident's not going to kill me, you're going to kill me. Can you slow down? Like I'm on this big wooden board, and they're flying to try to get me into surgery. And I get onto the surgical bed. They strip me down, and they count down, and then I wake up. And one thing I didn't mention about this story, and this is where it's going to be significant, because when I woke up, my friend Branderis was right to my left side. And I looked him in the face, Tom, and I said, I'm glad it was me. And let me give you the context on why I said that. So back in Utah, before we got to Wyoming, him and I were in a Walmart parking lot, and we almost got in a fist fight about who was going to ride in the cool truck. And I won. And so when I woke up and he was at my hospital bedside, I looked him in the eyes and I said, I'm glad it was me, because I knew that God had me in that truck for a reason. I knew that if he put me through that I was going to make it to the other side. And if I told you that journey was easy, it was not, because they looked at me and they said, you may not be able to walk, Jordan. And I'm one of those people, Tom, that gets negatively motivated. You tell me I can't do something, like I'm going to do everything in my power to get it done. And so I remember having to do all this rehab in the hospital for a couple weeks. I had a walker. I couldn't even shower myself at first, and then I got to showering myself, and then I went from the walker to the wheelchair, from the wheelchair to the crutches. And The most painful part, even more painful than the surgery, is the day that they took those surgical staples out, because these suckers are big. And that hurt worse than the accident hurt, because probably all the adrenaline. But I'm proud to say, through the glory of God and His grace and His mercy, I made a 6-month full recovery. And I'm still teaching breakdancing, no ailments from the injury, running, walking at 44 years old. And so, these stories hopefully show people that, if you haven't been taken out yet, you've got a plan and a purpose for your life. And it didn't click on me until I was in the corporate world of what that is, but I'm here to teach, to coach, to motivate and inspire people, and to show people it's possible, to show people that it doesn't matter where you're from, it doesn't matter what you've been through, adversity can truly give you strength, and it can enable you to look through a different lens.
Absolutely. I'm just thinking about the people in my circle, my life right now that I am attracted to because they are so open and authentic and transparent. We hear those words a lot, but you started with just one that I think is so typical for a lot of young children. They'd grown up without a father for a period of time, and how hard that was, and yet then the car accident, everything you've been through. I'm excited. And these things, are these in your book?
Yeah, some of these stories are in the book.
If you want to hear more, you get the book and keep going through it. But in those trying times, you keep referencing how God was there for you. And I think that's a moment for all of us to make a choice. Are we going to blame God and say this shouldn't have happened to me, and have a victim mentality the rest of our life, and bitterness and anger, and let it eat us up inside? Or like you have, take it and say, it didn't take me out. I'm still here for a reason.
Yeah.
And focus on what is the reason. What is your purpose?
Well, here, I think I got the cheat code, because I had a mom that with one lung that wasn't a victim of her circumstance.
Right.
She never complained about it. She had side hustles in the she went to dog races to try to win us money to buy us school clothes. She was playing bingo to try to win blackouts to try to provide for us. And so I got the hustle muscle from her. So you better believe I was selling baseball cards, I was selling sneakers, I was doing telemarketing. I did whatever I could because I saw that example for me. And yeah, I did not ever have that victim mentality. Anytime something would happen, it would motivate me even more. And I've always had this level of optimism where people are just like, how can you be so happy and optimistic? And it's like, if you see a woman suffer your whole life and not complain about it, that environment helps shape and mold you. And then of course, if you look at things like they happen for me and not to me, and we can extract those lessons, it doesn't mean it makes it any easier. It just means that you're going to shift your world into a different direction. And that's carried me even through, when I met my wife for the first time and found out that, through some terrible things that happened to her when she was a young girl that I wouldn't wish on anybody, really bad things. She told me that she wasn't supposed to be able to have kids. And that broke me, because I wanted to be a father. I didn't have a father, and I wanted to be one so bad, and I wanted to create a family. And so when she told me that, I just said, you know what? I still care about her, and let's see this thing out. Then a couple months later, she gets pregnant. Wow. And so we go from, I'm like, wait a minute, first you tell me you can't have them, now you're pregnant. And so now we're actually there's a lot of joy that was happening. And about 2 or 3 months in, she started having pain. And she goes to the doctor, and we lost the baby. And you want to talk about going from low to high, back to low. And I did the only thing that I knew that we could do. And we went with some friends to church. Actually, Pastor Andy Stanley was at church out in Alpharetta, Georgia. And we just gave it to God. And we just said, hey, if this is meant to be, then we're going to put this, have your will be done. And about 3 or 4 months later, she got pregnant again with our now almost 21-year-old son, Jaden. And over the last 20 years, we now have 6 healthy, beautiful children. And so, it's possible. Yeah. The doctors don't know everything. I saw it with my mom. I saw it with me. And then I've seen it with my wife. And so if you don't believe in miracles, I hope that you can hear the way that my life has panned out, and you see them all around. You see the protection. You see the things that shouldn't happen. And it's just amazing to experience it for yourself and give other people hope and say, your story's not over yet. Just because it may look like this on paper, it doesn't mean that's the end of your story.
How did you keep faith through those times? Like right when you lost that first child and that period of time until she did get pregnant again, like what's your advice for how to keep faith when faith isn't there? What did you?
It's about community. You know, we're not meant to do life alone.
Right.
We're meant to be around people, and we were fortunate to have people. Even though, like, when I look back, like we were partying, we were doing all the things, you know, smoking weed, we were doing all the stuff, like, but God's still there. Mm-hmm. He's not going to abandon us. He's not going to leave us or forsake us, even when we're knuckleheads, even when we're not living in His way. He still knows what the call and purpose is for our life. He's always there. And I've had many a times we're just doing the dumb things, making so many mistakes, and yeah, sometimes we're like, well, He's not gonna. You can't forgive that. But then you just read the Bible, you know, and you see it's stories of knuckleheads left and right, and then it's like, okay, well maybe he will do the things that he says he's gonna do, you know. But of course, the enemy wants doubt to creep in. The enemy wants you to feel sorry for yourself. The enemy wants you to push you away, to separate us, and that's his whole agenda. And so just finding community, finding people that we can unite with, that we can share tough things like this with, you know, it's not coincidence that we met a year ago and then a year later we're working together, right? Because we've built relationship over, even from a distance. But that's what community is all about. And so if you're watching this and you feel separated, get unseparated, go find people. Your people are out there, you just haven't looked in the right places. You got to keep looking, you got to keep searching, and you'll find community that's so powerful. Like us, we found our current church about a year before I got a promotion and moved to DC. Well, after about 5 years, we ended up moving back, and the day that we moved into our new house, 20 people showed up. Our moving truck was unpacked in like 10 minutes. That's what happens when you create community.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that. Anyone listening to this or watching, don't ever give up. As long as there's breath, there's hope, and there is a purpose for your life. So reach out, get in touch with a local church, local nonprofit. Do not isolate. And today's not enough time to get into my story. I'll do that another time. But thank you we're going to keep going here, but thank you for sharing what you have so far. Take us forward to the last few years of your life. Like, what are you currently involved in that gives you so much passion? I heard you say earlier, most of the time you don't even feel like you're working.
Yeah,
you're having fun.
I'm having
doing
fun.
What you
That's
do.
right.
You're doing what God designed you to do. You have a purpose. You're very clear on what that is, and just
yeah. So I'd like to take you a little bit. So earlier in our relationship, when I did door-to-door sales 5 years. Even with Natalie, when she was pregnant with our son, we were like in Atlanta. Then we moved to Houston, from Houston to New Orleans, and I was just knocking on doors and selling, you know. And I always would go back to what I'm good at, which is talking to people, communicating, you know, using that influence for transactions. And so what I found out was after our son was born, and I left New Orleans and moved back to Georgia, we were sitting in her grandmother's double-wide trailer. No money. I was doing odd-end construction jobs, and I remember looking around like, this is not what my life is going to be. You know, you ever have that time where you're just like, is this really what life is like? And so I did the thing that I didn't really want to do. I don't like asking people for help. If anyone resonate with that, maybe you don't like asking people for help. Well, I made the hard call to my dad, who, as you know, is a Filipino immigrant. And, you know, I said, hey, Dad, we just had your new grandson, and I need a job, and we need a place to stay. Can I come move in with you? And like every good Asian parent, he said, yes, you can, but you got to be out in a month. So he hires me. I'm now running a landscaping crew. It's actually where I learned how to speak Spanish. In high school, I didn't pay attention, but you had to pay attention if you're running a crew. And so I actually learned how to speak Spanish really well. And we were doing 35 yards a day in the DC heat. DC, Maryland, Virginia, I mean, mowing, blowing, weed eating, mulching, transplant, I mean, you name it, we were doing it. And all of a sudden, winter hits in DC. And when winter hits in DC, at least back then, it doesn't snow as often now, but there's no grass that grows anymore. There's no more leaves to blow. And so I was back to square one. I needed a job again. And so I answered this ad in the paper for a window company. I go through their sales training for a couple weeks, and then they send me out to the field. And one thing you'll learn about me, folks, is I am terrible at like handyman stuff. You don't want me to measure anything. And I had this poor couple, I went into their house and I measured all their windows. I'm pretty confident they were not measured right. And I ended up selling them a bunch of windows. And that's kind of when I knew, I was like, this is not for me. Like, this job is not for me. And so I was in the leasing office in the apartment that we were in. And I walked in one day, and everywhere, I've always just been the guy that talks to everybody. I'm always have a smile on my face. I'm always happy. And the leasing manager goes, "Hey, have you ever thought about doing leasing?" And I said, "What's that?" She said, "Well, just kind of like when you toured the place and we showed it to you and we rented it to you, that's what you'd be doing." And I said, "That sounds awesome." She's like, "Yeah, you'll be paid hourly, plus you'll be paid commission." And my only question, Tom, was, "Do you have benefits?" Because we literally just sat in a doctor's office for an hour. We went to the actual room where the doctor was for 30 minutes, and we saw the doctor for 5, and they handed us a $600 bill. And I was making $700 a week. The math didn't add up. And so when she said they had benefits, I applied. I remember actually in the interview process, a guy by the name of Rob interviewed me, and he said, "Hey, where do you see yourself in 5 years?" And I said, "I want to have your job." And he goes, "You don't have this job yet." And that was kind of like, all right, maybe I should relax a little bit and not be that ambitious. And he still hired me anyways. And so I got a job in leasing. I excelled. I actually won an iPhone back in 2007 for being the top sales guy on the East Coast. This is the original iPhone.
Right.
And then I got a promotion, which was a terrible decision, by the way. You don't promote the best sales guy to be a bookkeeper. So I got promoted from leasing to assistant manager, which is a collection agent and a bookkeeper. And I hated that job so much that I crushed it. I did very well. I performed at a high level. And they actually, I got assistant manager of the year, believe it or not. And so I went from, and then 9 months later, I got promoted to property manager, where I was managing multi-million-dollar apartment buildings. So from not knowing anything about apartments except for you live in them, to managing multi-million-dollar buildings in 16 months, it was the fastest the company had ever seen. And I remember getting this job and this role, and now I got to do variance reports and budgets and all this crazy stuff. And I was like, I remember picking up the phone and calling my wife, and she's like, they called me to this building, and I was like, "Hey babe, I'm getting fired." Like, the regional called me, the VP called me, pretty sure I'm gonna have to look for a new job. And I walked in the office, and the other guy wasn't in there that managed it, and I was like, they got him too. Like, all right, going down the rabbit hole. And they said, "Hey, we just want to tell you, you've moved up so quick. We're proud of you, and we want to promote you to manager." And they hand me the keys to the office, and they left. And I was like, what do I do? Like, I didn't know how to be a manager. I didn't know how to manage teams or do any of that. But, you grow up quick, right? When you get put into roles, you either got to step up or step out. And I was all about stepping up. And so I went from this small property with just me and a maintenance guy to getting another promotion and managing a team of about 8. And then I went to another brand new lease up and managed another team of 6. And then we moved to Georgia, and I was actually left the company because my wife was homesick. And I took a job with a smaller real estate management company. And while we were at this job, I was like the cleanup guy. So they hired me to come in. There was a lot of crime, a lot of drugs. They wanted to renovate. They wanted to really get this property positioned to sell it at the highest place they could. And so I'm in this property. I was there for probably about 6 or 7 months at the time, maybe 8. And it was about 3 in the morning, and we woke up to gunshots. And somebody had went to 2 buildings down from where my family was sleeping, because we lived on site, and tried to rob a guy, and they got in an altercation, and a guy got shot. And I ended up essentially becoming the scapegoat. I was paid to resign. And I remember thinking, like, what am I going to do now? And so I made a call to a VP at my old company. I explained the situation. They said, don't worry, we'll have a spot for you next week. And they provided a brand new building. I had a team of 24 on 23 acres, multiple buildings right near Emory University, doing the most revenue in the company, holding up the weight of the rest of the organization. And while I was there, my first week, Tom, a tornado decides to hit Midtown Atlanta. And the power's out for a week. I mean, you want to talk about adversity. So now I got residents coming in. They're like, our food's spoiled, our power's out. Coming into a dark office where I'm working out of, and they say, why aren't you answering your phone? I'm like, our power's out just like yours. Like, what are you talking about? And I was driving from my house 30 minutes away with power to go work in an environment with no power. And while I was there, that's the time when my mom got sick. And so when she got sick, my performance started to tank. And I got a demotion because I wasn't performing. And I want to share with the audience that was actually the best thing that could have happened to me, because I needed time to heal. And I got a smaller community with a smaller team. And while I was at that property, the job came open for a corporate role, which was a learning and development manager. And I remember reading this job description, and it's like, you got to have a 4-year degree. I was like, well, don't have that. You got to have X amount of experience. I was like, don't qualify for that. But there was just something inside of me that said, you know what? Someone internally told me about this, so why not? And I applied for it, and I beat out all the other candidates. And that sparked an 8-year journey in training and development. And that's really where I grew up. That's really where I became a man. I got certified in Myers-Briggs in that role. And I was teaching a 6-month leadership program that helped people take an introspective look at themselves and their personalities. And people were saying that their relationships at home got better, that their job became easier once they started to understand personality type. I was diving into emotional intelligence, strengths-based leadership. And I started to coach people, about 20 people a year, and they started to say, Jordan, like, my life has changed. Yeah. And that's really kind of when the light bulb went off. And I remember I wore so many hats. I was the leadership guy. I built all our sales training classes. I was teaching people how to use Zoom back in 2016. I was learning video editing. And I remember when I left to start my business, I remember asking God, like, why did you just waste this time? Like, why did I learn all this stuff? But guess who doesn't know how to do this? Most business owners, right? Because they don't know how to do all these things. And he gave me all these tools in my tool belt that I had no clue I'd still be using to this day, but he was preparing me for such a time as this. And now I get to coach and train and teach people all over the world how to blaze their own trails and become coaches and business owners. And it's just so cool how he uses everything for good. He uses all our circumstances, all our failures, all of our bad decisions, all of our good decisions, and he uses it to help prepare you and shape and mold you for what's possible and what's going to come.
It seems like with a lot of people, it's a good, 15 to 20 years of real struggle and jumping sometimes from job to job and, trying to find that sweet spot. But during that time, you do what you can to retain everything you're learning to find out later, maybe it's when you're 40, maybe when you're 50, but it all starts to come together in this puzzle that finally you go, oh, that wasn't on accident. Yeah. That wasn't for nothing. I mean, even having empathy, and I know we don't have a lot longer today, but having empathy for other people and understanding that what they're going through might not be exactly what you've been through or I've been through, but just an understanding to say, I can see where that person's at right now. Yeah. And then connect with them. We talk a lot about the importance of connection, but how would you or I be able to connect with people if we hadn't been through
100%.
Some
yeah, our mess becomes our message, right? Our test becomes our testimony, and it's the very things that have happened to us that we're able to relate and connect those dots for other people.
In the next few minutes as we wrap up, if you could bring all that into where are you at now? If somebody wanted to engage with you, what would be the reason they would? How would they find you? What services are you offering? And just kind of do a wrap up here on
on this. I know we'll do more of these in the future and get the word out, but I'll give you the last few minutes. And
Yeah. So a year before I left my corporate role, I started this little podcast called Blaze Your Own Trail. You can find us at byotpod.com. And it's a show about interviewing trailblazers, people like you, people that have blazed their own trail in business and life, and find out their journey to success. And within a year of doing the first 40 episodes, everyone I had on the show said, "Why are you in corporate? Why aren't you doing your own thing?" They started to see things in me that I didn't see in myself. And along that journey, I started going to a business group through my church, and all of these guys were saying, "You need to start a business." And so I had all these seeds deposited and planted. And so in 2021, I got fed up with corporate. I started building my brand on LinkedIn. I went from 7,000 followers to 20,000 in 6 months. And I started saying wow, this is interesting. And I had to kind of reverse engineer some of the things that I did to do that. And people started reaching out to me for coaching. How did you build your brand? How did you do this? And I remember I was coaching people for free for 3 months. And it took a very important person, my wife, Natalie. She came downstairs one day and she goes, "You're on a lot of calls lately, Jordan. Are any of these people paying you?" And I was like, "Nope, but maybe they should be." And that's kind of how the initial business, as a side hustle, began, because I built a program. I literally looked at, hey, what did I do to build this audience? What systems did I do? I had to reverse engineer it, and that turned into the first 12-week LinkedIn program, which is now only 6 weeks, because I've been able to, as I got more knowledge, collapse the timeline for people and getting them to results quicker. So what I love to do is I work with entrepreneurs, coaches, authors, speakers, and I teach them how they can build a brand authentic to them, and how they can collapse the timeline on getting the knowledge that I got without all the stresses and things and failures and fumbles that I went through. And so it's helping a lot of people, realize that their story is powerful, and how can we share our story? How can we be our authentic selves online? And how can we use that to impact people around the world and turn that into coaching services, into podcasts? I help people launch courses and newsletters, and the company is called Blaze Your Own Trail Consulting. And I was sharing with you earlier, because I started to show up and be myself and share some of the stories that your audience is hearing today, that's turned into, I'm now a co-founder in a company in Belgium. And I've got equity in all these different companies, and none of it would have ever happened if I would have just stayed silent, if I would have been a victim. But I started to say, you know what, my mom went through all this stuff. I actually have things that I've been through as well, and I mustered up the courage to start to share it. And there's some major unlock, folks, when we get vulnerable and we say, you know what, I've got a story too that the world needs to hear. And so that's my encouragement to anybody. If you're watching this or you're hearing the sound of my voice, you have a story. You probably are just too afraid to share it, or maybe no one's encouraged you to do it. And so what I do in my coaching is I encourage people, share your story. I want to know your story. I learned Tom's story, and we were able to really build some messaging that's going to impact and help people all over the world. I really believe that. And so if you're looking to partner with somebody that can help you do that, that's what I love to do. I love to encourage, to inspire, to motivate people, and to show them that you can blaze your own trail. In business, you can blaze your own trail in life, but you've got to do it with firm foundations, meaning I can know where my source comes from. It's my faith, and I know what I've been through can create impact. And once we can put those things together, there's no end to the possibilities.
Yeah. Well, I'm thankful you're on the trail with me as I'm blazing my own brand, my own trail.
Yes, sir.
It's great to be able to ask for help. Most of the great things in the last few years of my life have been when I've reached out and asked for help, and you've already, in a short amount of time, blessed my life and
appreciate that
to be my coaching career and fast track some of those things that instead of me spending years trying to figure it out, we can condense that.
Yeah, we can collapse the timeline. If Disney World can do it by selling you a fast pass, then we can do it in business as well.
Yeah.
You just have to be willing to invest in yourself, and we are the best investment we can make. When we invest in us, other people will start to invest in us.
Yeah.
And I think that's the mistake that I made for so long, is I wasn't willing to pay to play. I wasn't willing to invest, but people that pay attention. And so when we can invest in ourselves, other people will invest time and energy and effort into us.
Thank you so much.
Hey, my pleasure.
Last
Thank you so much
question
for having me on. Yeah.
Absolutely, Jordan. When when and how do I get a hat?
Merch is coming, folks. If you want a hat, blaze your own trail. And our trailblazers do things a little unorthodox. That's why if you're watching this video and you're like, the guy doesn't even know how to put hats on, the stuff is backwards. It's on purpose. It's reverse and upside down because every trailblazer is unique. They're different. They do things unorthodox, and that's what trailblazing is all about.
That's awesome. Everybody have a good day. Talk to you soon.